For those people being released by this administration that clearly don't qualify, they're going to get ordered removed. Don't get too comfortable, because we're going to come look for you, and we're going to deport you. That's what the law says.
So happy to be back home in Texas. I've had the craziest travel schedule ever this year. I mean, I went from Budapest, Hungary to Israel, traveled all over Israel to every single border with, of course, Tom Homan, my very special guest, former Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer, as well as director of ICE under President Trump, and somebody who I'm going to be working with all the time now in the near future on our new nonprofit Border 911, Border 911. You guys, we're going to be talking about that today and why it is so important that we all, as citizens of this country, pay attention to what is happening on the U.S. southern border, northern border for that matter as well. But it really affects every single one of us. And Tom and I, Derek Maltz, Jason Jones, Victor Avila, we're all of us experts on the border. We are on a quest to educate the American people and not allow this administration to continue to abuse its power and endanger our lives and that of our families and our children in particular, right? We have a nation we believe in and a nation that we want to fight for. And that's what we are going to do. Today will be the part one, however, of my conversation with former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Tom Homan. He and I are going to discuss not only our trip to Israel, but the new organization, as I said, Border 911, and what it's going to take to protect our nation and win back the White House with someone that actually cares about us, about the American people, and protecting our nation. But first, gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for. I talk about this all the time. Diversify, diversify, diversify. It's just that important. You need to protect your family. You need to protect your assets and your money. And the way you do that is by diversifying. And you can do that with Allegiance Gold. Allegiance Gold is a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show, an organization that I absolutely believe in, and one that I believe will protect you and your family. Don't just trust me. I want you to do your own investigation, do your own research, go online, look at what they offer. And I mean, it's just fabulous. Right now, Sara Carter listeners get a $5,000, listen to this, a free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that I sent you. Just say, hey, Sara sent me. And that's it. And you'll get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase. Like I said, Allegiance Gold can help protect your 401k, your IRA. They can do that with physical gold and silver, and that can be delivered securely right to your front door. Yeah, you don't need to head out and carry the gold back. They'll deliver it right to your front door, and they will do it securely. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. And you don't want to waste your time. You want to do that today. Look at what happened in Canada with Justin Trudeau. Look at what's happened in the United States with the banking systems going so woke. You just don't know what's going to happen in the near future. And look at what's happening in Brussels right now and in Paris with all the riots in the streets. Please protect your family first. So don't wait. Call or click today, 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we actually can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, or go to protectwithsara.com. So happy to be back with Tom Homan. And I know I was bragging about you, Tom, to everybody because not only were you the director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement and did your job, but you are still fighting to protect America and to protect our national security. And I'm in that fight with you now. Tom has recruited me to Border 911. Maybe we'll start off with that. Tell everybody a little bit about what we're doing there.
Well, first of all, I think people ought to go to border911.com. Go there and sign up because you get notifications when we're up and live. Right now, we have the site built. So, look, I've teamed up with a lot of border experts, including you, Sara, border expert. You've been doing this for decades. Myself, I spent, as you know, almost 35 years in immigration enforcement. I started out as a Border Patrol agent. Then I became the first director of ICE, actually came up through the ranks. So I spent almost 35 years doing the job. We also got Mark Morgan, who is the commissioner of CBP under President Trump. We also have Derek Maltz of the DEA, who's pushing the fentanyl message across the United States and how the border affects the flow of fentanyl across the border. We got Jason Jones from Newsmax. Jason Jones brings a unique perspective because he spent, a couple of decades with the Texas Department of Public Safety in the intelligence division that studied the activity of cartels. So he's the cartel expert. So he can talk about the border and the national security threat, the cartel threat. We got Victor Avila, who's an agent who worked for me in ICE that, spent a lot of time on border security. Actually was assigned in Mexico for a number of years, working to combat the criminal cartels in Mexico, and actually was shot several times by cartel members, actually killed his partner and shot and wounded Victor. Yeah. So he has a story to tell. So if you look at who we have, it's the most educated people who can talk about the border. And the reason I created Board 911, it's going to be an effort by all of us, including you, Sarah, to spend the next year and several months to educate the American people on the facts of what's happening in the border, plus the interior with immigration, customs enforcement, and why everybody needs to be concerned, why the border affects every man, woman, and child in this country, why the border affects every town, city, and state in this country. So when you get to the voting booth in the next election, hopefully you'll go there and vote for border security, whoever that person is. You vote because we have educated you on why it is absolutely necessary to have a secure border.
I agree with you, Tom, and that's why I feel so privileged to be with all of you who I consider colleagues and friends and experts in the border, national security, as well as humanitarian crisis that our nation's facing. And just so everybody remembers, I've done a few podcasts already from Israel, but Tom and I were in Israel. This was your trip, Tom. I joined along with Victor Avila to be a part of this trip. It was a secure border focus, and especially on how the Israeli Defense Forces handle their own security in Israel, because obviously they're facing a continuous threat as we are. It's a little different. But did you feel like you got enough from what we saw from IDF to realize like how important a border is to a nation? I mean, I feel like I did.
Yeah, I did, and it was interesting. They have like 5 different borders, and some border security is more stringent than others. Then, you and I were on board of Egypt, where they just have, they have a fence. But then you go on the border of other parts of the border, and they actually have a wall like Trump built, right, goes deeper in the ground, and they use lethal force. So anybody goes over that wall, and that's because of the threat of Hezbollah and the people that want to do away with Israel. So, yeah, I learned a lot. They got some technology similar to ours. They got some technology they got a little bit of technology I think's better than ours. Like the one border in Syria. I meant Egypt, not Syria. Anyways, border of Egypt, they had the chain link fence. But they had technology. Anybody got within 20 miles of the fence, they had like technology to tell them someone's approaching the fence line. That was actually something the technology built within the Trump wall. However, after building the wall, we had to add that technology. But the Biden administration immediately stopped not only building the wall, they stopped adding the technology in the already existing wall. So it was great. Our two nations share an awful lot, so it was great to see how they're doing it and how we did it and compare. But one thing I did, same as you did, I realized that they have the same fight we have. It's not only a national security issue; it's a matter of their sovereignty, a matter of protecting their people. And you and I have talked about this many times. Since Joe Biden's become president, the Border Patrol has already arrested over 230 Absolutely. People off the watch list. Now, if they arrested 230, we know there's almost 1.8 million gotaways. Border Patrol arrested people from 171 different countries. Some of these countries sponsor terror. You can't, there's no way, there's not a single one of that 1.8 million gotaways that didn't come here to blow something up and do us harm. So I've said it many times. I've heard you say it. What's happening on our border the last 2 years is the biggest national security failure I've seen in this nation in the last 2 years. The difference between us and Israel is Israel takes her border security very seriously. It's a national security issue for them, regardless of who's their president or who their leader is. Seems like in the United States, it was very important under President Trump. But with Joe Biden, he just opened the border up and threw national security out the window, which that's the biggest difference I saw. We're more political, and we have foolishness when a Democrat gets in the White House and doesn't take border security serious. Israel thinks it's serious every day.
That is such a great point, because it really doesn't matter who is in office, who is the prime minister in Israel. I mean, to some extent, when it comes to their border security, it's about protecting the state of Israel. And even if they have disputes on how they want to handle that and how they do that, the focus is still like, we've got to protect our nation. Folks, the time is here. It's right now. Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom, put together by Eduardo Verástegui, my good friend who is fighting to end human trafficking, right? We are all working together to ensure that children are protected, that their stories are told, that they are not forgotten. And I want you to hear this. Every year, over 2 million children are trafficked around the world. This is it. July 4th is upon us, right? And Sound of Freedom is being released theatrically in the United States. Now, this new movie is aimed at raising the awareness of this often unseen horror. Sound of Freedom from Angel Studios, the same studios that produced The Chosen with all of your great help. Such a phenomenal television series about the life of Jesus Christ. And this Sound of Freedom is going to wake you up. You're going to wake up and want to do something. You are going to fight for children's lives, and you're going to be uplifted by the message in this movie, how one person can make a difference. Purchase your tickets online now, July 4th, tomorrow. Get your tickets online now. Make this the biggest movie of the year. Let's get out there. Let's buy these tickets. Let's save lives. It's new in theaters. And by the way, new theaters will be added daily. So check the website for current information, angel.com/freedom. That's angel.com/freedom. This is an eye-opener, folks. I spend most of my time on the border, and I see children all the time that are suffering, children that have been trafficked, children that have been abused. But I saw this film and my heart just leapt, right? When you see the kind of suffering, the silent suffering that happens to so many children around the world, and how one person, how Tim Ballard and others can make a difference. Just let's get outside of ourselves for 1 minute and realize how important it is that we all stand up and speak out. Let's save our children. Let's save these children. Guys, we have more than 500,000 children a year that go missing alone in the United States. How insane is that? 50% of those are victims between the ages of 12 and 15 years old. 27% of all human trafficking worldwide is children. So let's help spread this message worldwide. Sound of Freedom is coming to theaters July 4th. That is tomorrow. So buy your tickets today to reserve a spot opening week. I've seen the film. It's absolutely phenomenal. I am going to see it again tomorrow with the final edits. It's going to be out in theaters. My family is supporting it. If more theaters are sold out, it will help raise awareness of this issue that often goes unnoticed. Find a theater near you by visiting angel.com/freedom. Again, angel.com/freedom. By supporting Sound of Freedom, you will contribute in raising the awareness and propelling a movement to save millions of children around the world. Get your tickets today at angel.com/freedom. That is angel.com/freedom. Hey, if you're not subscribed to my show here on YouTube and Rumble, you're missing out. We have lots of really great guests and special guests too that make a difference, ones that'll help you find answers to some of the biggest questions you have, I think, on a national level, both politically and personally, and sometimes even about UFOs. Hit the subscribe button for my latest content. Thank you. Why do you think, Tom, and I know everybody asks me the same question, but why do you think the Biden administration, and I say it's an extension of the Obama administration, but why are the Democrats so focused on just leaving the border wide open and allowing everyone and everything to pour in? I have never seen it this bad. Why are they doing this?
Well, that's just a piece of the puzzle, right? So the open border of some millions coming across the border at the same time, they decapitated ICE. So I know for a fact, based on 10 years of court data, that 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border never get relief from U.S. courts because they simply don't qualify. They're not really escaping fear and persecution from the home government. They're coming here for a better life, which doesn't qualify for asylum. But at the same time, they let millions in. They've also abolished the ICE mission because Secretary Mayorkas said being in the country illegally on its own isn't enough for ICE to seek you and arrest you. So not only did they open the border, but that 9 out of 10 loser case, they're not going anywhere. They want them to stay. And why is that? I think it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, future Democratic voters. And that may be so, but people need to know they don't even have to get to there. Because when President Biden signed over 90 executive orders, he also overturned the Trump census rule. Trump had a rule that if you're in the country illegally, you're not going to be counted in the census. Biden administration immediately reversed that. So all these millions of people are being released that are heading to sanctuary cities across the country. They'll be counted in the next census, which does what? Is going to result in more seats in the House to the Democrats. And then when they reproportionate seats in the House, the Democrats will win more seats in the House, which gives them control of Congress. So hear me. This isn't an accident. This isn't incompetence. This isn't mismanagement. This is on purpose. They perceive a future political advantage, and it's all over seats in the House because more illegal aliens will be counted in the next census.
That's something that President Trump, and I want to bring that up only because there's no other way to compare it, right? We're comparing one administration and how they handled the border and the difficulties and challenges that were under President Trump to the Biden administration. It's like two polar opposites. And I remember like in 2018 when President Trump really hit hard and said, you know, these credible fear claims, we are going to go and dig deep. We're not going to allow people to come in and say, you know, my neighbor is mean to me, and then they'll be able to stay in America. I mean, people can say pretty much whatever they want right now. I gave the example of one time an ICE officer told me that one of the credible fear claims was that their neighbor, one person claimed the neighbor was a witch that struck their house with lightning bolts, and the asylum adjudicator gave them credible fear. Said, you can stay in America. Welcome to America, for the most ridiculous claim. So under Trump, it became much harder to do that. So do you see it going back in that direction? Like, how do we get the nation back on track to following the law?
Well, first of all, under Trump, what we simply did, we went back to the wording in the statute, which is all says, you claim asylum if you're escaping fear and persecution from your home government because of race, religion, political affiliation, or you're a participant in a specific social group. So like some countries, if you're homosexual, they find that a crime which you can die for. Well, it's mostly based on, persecution from your government because of race, religion, and political affiliation. And that's the definition. That's the asylum statute. That's the way it reads, almost verbatim. So President Trump said, "This is people who can prove this will get asylum." What this administration has done is they've changed it. It's no longer, they don't read the statute as we read it, and I know how to read. I'm not an attorney, but I can read. They've added all sorts of reasons why you can claim asylum, which the statute clearly says isn't part of asylum. So how do we get it back? We get it back when the next administration, which I hope is Trump, we go back to reading the statute the way it's designed. You can't, administration shouldn't be going into a written statute that was enacted by Congress and signed by a president and just reinterpret it. The law is the law, and it reads well. If they want to change the law, then change it. But you can't just reinterpret what the meaning of the law is. So the Trump administration going back to the legal wording, and I can tell you right now, that's why 9 out of 10 failed, because that first interview at the border, the threshold for proof was so low on purpose, because they didn't want to accidentally send someone back to get persecuted or tortured or killed by their home government. So the threshold on first interview is very low, but when they get to immigration court, if they actually go to immigration court, that threshold is much higher. For instance, about 90% will pass that first interview on the border because only a few questions are asked, and the cartels teach them what they need to say to pass that first interview. However, when they get in front of the judge, that threshold is much higher, and like I say, 9 out of 10 fail. What we've asked Congress to do, what President Trump will have Congress do, is take that burden of proof that the immigration court has and apply that to the border. Should be one burden of proof. So that would also deal with, but what the President Trump did, was the game changer, was remain in Mexico. Now, the high court of the land have said remain in Mexico is legal. So this administration, the Biden administration, can put Remain in Mexico program back in place tomorrow and solve 85% of their problems. They don't want to do it. President Trump says you can claim asylum, but you're going to wait in Mexico to hear your case. That way, when they lose their case, not 9 out of 10 lose their case, they're not running around in the wind. The United States, we have them. So it was a game changer. And after about 6 months of Remain in Mexico, people stopped coming because they realized it's not catch and release. You're not going to be released in the United States. You're going to have to wait in Mexico. They know they don't really qualify. So why sell everything you own to come here knowing you're not going to be released in the United States on a fraudulent claim? That's how we get control of the asylum. But I'll say this, I've said it many times, it took a lot of hate from the left. I promised President Trump he comes back, I come back, and I got a message to these millions of people this administration released in the United States that will lose their case, 9 out of 10, and they'll get order removal, but they won't leave. They'll hide out, waiting for the next amnesty, waiting for the next docket. So those people being released by this administration that clearly don't qualify, they're going to get order removed. Don't get too comfortable, because we're going to come look for you, and we're going to deport you. That's what the law says. People say they have the right to claim due process. They have the right to see an attorney. They have the right to due process. I agree. But we also have the right to execute the final orders of the court. You can't say they got the right to process, but I don't like the decision. Let's forget about due process. No. If we spend billions of dollars on due process, when that court makes a decision, that decision needs to be carried out, or there is no due process. If a immigration judge's order doesn't mean anything, then let's shut down the immigration courts too. So it can't be one or the other. It has to be. We have to follow the law right to the end.
It brings up a really valid point, and one that a lot of people have argued that I've talked to in Border Patrol and ICE. It's like, okay, so if you've got a bunch of people working, and I remember seeing this in LA, and actually it's not all Hispanic. I remember ICE raided a bar restaurant it was in Santa Monica, California. This was maybe 2 decades ago, maybe 20 years ago. And I remember they raided the bar and restaurant. It was all Scottish and Irish illegal workers working in the bar, and they took them and they sent them back. And it was like, okay, if you have an order to be removed, if I was in Germany, they would remove me. I remember in Germany, you couldn't stay past your visa, or you would be gone. You would be out of the country. Same in France. Now things have changed a little, but look at what's happening in France. Look at what's happening in Brussels. I mean, we're seeing riots erupt. The cities are out of control. A lot of it has to do with an overflow of migrants. There's not enough housing. There's not enough resources. Or even if there is, people are agitated and angry. Do you think that could happen here?
I think there's a lot of pressure being put on this nation. I think schools are overcrowded now. It's going to get worse with children that don't speak English, which hold back, the other children.
Right.
A class of 20 is now a class of 35, and it's going to get worse. Trauma centers have shut down. Hospitals are going broke. Even the El Paso Hospital and Yuma Hospital, they're both millions of dollars in the hole because they have to treat illegal aliens coming across the border. At one point, Yuma maternity ward was full of illegal aliens having babies, which are going to be U.S. citizens because they're born in the United States. And American citizens who were trying to have a baby had to drive an hour and a half away to get a maternity bed. So, look, it's a strain on our health care. It's a strain on our school system. It's a strain on our social services. But let me be clear, because people always say, well, illegal aliens aren't eligible for welfare and food stamps and all these social services. Look, folks, I've been doing this 34 years. One of the first things they do when they get to the United States is have a baby, a U.S. citizen baby. As soon as they have that baby, now they do qualify. They have a U.S. citizen child, and they do have to take advantage of social services. When I was the ICE director, under Jay Johnson was the secretary, we went and did a family operation. All these family groups coming across. Like I said, 9 out of 10 lost their case, so we had order removal. We went to look for these people, remove them. When my agents went nationwide looking for these people, over 40% of these women were either pregnant or had a U.S. citizen child already. One of the first things they do when they get here. And that's why President Trump wants to end birthright citizenship, because that's a big magnet to come here. But I'll say one thing different, though. It has changed immensely from the times we talked about that raid on that workplace. Because when I was an agent, if we find you and you're in the country illegally, you got arrested and you got deported. And now, I'll reiterate, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, has told ICE, if they're in the country illegally and that's the only thing going on, then you can't arrest them. He has instructed immigration officers who took an oath to enforce immigration law, they can't arrest somebody for being here illegally anymore. You have to wait till they commit a serious offense. And by that time, it's too late. Talk to and you know some of these, Sarah. We've talked to hundreds of moms and angel dads who will tell you when they commit a crime of a serious nature, that's too late. When you hear it, there's nothing in the immigration law that says there's a prerequisite, you got to commit yet another crime to be targeted by ICE. Being in the country illegally, crossing the border illegally is a crime in itself. And ICE shouldn't be, told you can't arrest them. They're here in violation of law. And I said, when I first became ICE director, I took a lot of hate to this. My first testimony, I made a statement to Congress. If you're in the United States illegally, you better start looking over your shoulder because we're looking for you. And I took, you put fear in the immigrant community. You put fear. I said, no, I'm putting the fear in the illegal immigrant community, and they should be scared. Just like I don't go 100 miles an hour down the freeway because I'm afraid I'll get a ticket. I don't lie on my taxes because I'm afraid I'll get put in prison. When you enter this country illegally, which is a crime, you shouldn't be okay with it. You shouldn't feel comfortable with it. You need to be uncomfortable. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Right. But when the president's actually making the invitation and saying, come on in, I'm not going to do anything to you. And the guys that are working in the field are like, wait a minute, my job has to mean something because I have been, kind of ordained by the nation to protect our borders. And now you're saying my job means nothing, right? Because that's really what's happening here.
And you talk to agents as well as I have. That's why morale's at an all-time low. Morale's not even existent anymore. That's why
are up. Suicides were up in Border Patrol like exponentially. Morale's down, and immigration and customs enforcement officers know that their job is like I talk to them and they're like, look, I love my job, but it's a joke now. Like I can't even do what I'm supposed to do.
No, and these guys, there's a massive exodus between retirements and just quitting. And, like Border Patrol offered a $10,000 signing bonus with an additional $10,000 when you get out of the academy. And they still can't hire. No one's going to come and take an oath to enforce the law. They're not being allowed to enforce it. I mean, this is a national security mission. They take it seriously. And I've talked to literally hundreds and hundreds of Border Patrol agents. I haven't talked to one who wasn't completely demoralized because they know while they're in a facility changing diapers and making baby formula, making a hospital run, or taking aliens to an airport and send them on their way, they feel like a tourist agent, not a law enforcement officer. But they know while they're doing that, the other parts of the border that aren't covered, fentanyl is coming across, killing Americans. Women and children are being trafficked, sex trafficked across the border. We got non-suspected terrorists coming across those unguarded portions of the border. And these men have to go to bed every night, or depending on what shift they're at, knowing that because of what they're doing, bad things happen.
So what happens, when one of those guys is being, forced to babysit a bunch of children that could have died, but thank God, because of the grace of God, they're out there on the front lines and saving lives that the president is basically putting in danger. I blame President Biden and his policies for this. Just like last week, there were 10 kids. I got a call from Lieutenant Chris Olivares. He said, I got 10 kids without parents in 115-degree weather, sitting by a fence line. And they could easily have died if we weren't there. But what happens when that Border Patrol agent or immigration and customs enforcement officer is doing that, and then a terrorist comes in, or a sleeper cell, and then they bomb a soft target in the United States or something? What is it? Lawmakers are going to then point the fingers at them and say they weren't doing their job when it was really the Biden administration that made it happen?
Border Patrol they're always made out to be the bad guy under Democratic. You ask any Border Patrol how they felt in the Trump administration, they said, what? That president had our six. The Secretary of Homeland Security had our six. But yeah, they'll throw them under the bus. And you're right, the cartels, they don't care about these people. I was talking to Jason Jones just day before yesterday. There's groups, there's such high heat down there. People are dropping like flies making the journey. And the cartels won't call 911. They won't call for help. They won't allow them to. Matter of fact, the sheriff down there, I saw an interview, Jason, with the sheriff down there, that one one smuggling organization, Cartel. There was a 15-year-old boy that was losing his mind. He started yelling and screaming because he's dehydrated and had heat stroke, and he was screaming for help. And they told him to be quiet. They don't want to be, they want to be caught. And they killed him with a rock just to shut him up. So rather than call him for help for this 15-year-old who had a long life to live, they killed him, because if he keeps yelling and the board actually finds him, then the other 6 or 7 people with him, they're not going to get paid. So because they're afraid they're not going to get paid for 5 or 6 people, they kill a 15-year-old boy. And it just happens every day. And this is why I get so angry. That's why I'm pissed off all the time. Because this administration comes in and says, oh, the Trump administration were inhumane, they're cruel. Let me be clear. And Trump had illegal immigration at a 45-year low, depending on what time period you look at, down 83%. When 83% less people come in, less people are dying, less people are getting raped. And under the Biden administration, since he opened the floodgates, over 1,700 migrants have died on U.S. soil since he took the White House. That is a record by far. Over 100,000 Americans died from fentanyl overdoses that come across the border from fentanyl. Record by far. The number of trafficking of women, sex trafficking women and children is the highest it's ever been. A record by far. The number of known suspected terrorists arrested trying to cross the border is over 200. I think it's 237. I lose track. They catch one every day. A record by far. Don't tell me the Biden administration is humane. You've killed more Americans and killed more migrants than any administration in history. And you want to say you're humane? No, you're not. You're killing people at record numbers.
I just want to say thanks to my good friend Tom Homan for joining me today. I look so forward to working with him and working with you all in the near future. I hope we end up in one of your communities, one of your towns, one of your cities. I hope you come and you listen to what we have to say. It is just that important. It is going to be important when you think about it in the scope of your family, right? And protecting your children. I've said this before and I'll say it again. We are the only ones that are going to fight for our children the way that we do, right? We would do anything to protect our children if we found out, and I say this all the time when I speak to people, if you found out there was a predator outside of your child's school, and that they were lurking and targeting your child, what would you do? I know what most of you would do. I would hope 100% of you would be at that school and doing everything in your life to defend your child. You would put your own life at risk to defend your child. Well, I'm telling you right now, every single day that your child goes to school, every single day that your child is out there on their own or trafficking on the internet, moving around the internet, talking to their friends. There are predators out there targeting your children. And if you do not take that seriously, if you don't think the border is your problem, then you're mistaken. I'm not going to say that you don't, that you're dumb or that you don't get it or that you don't think it's true, because the mainstream media has been lying to you. But I will show you, Tom Homan will show you, our friends Victor Avila, who were targeted by the cartel, they will show you how serious it is and what you can do. More importantly, give you solutions of what you can do, what I can do together, what we can do as a community to fight these monsters together, to keep them away from our children, to give our children and our nation a fighting chance. Thank you so much for being with me. Come back Wednesday for part 2 of our great conversation with Tom Homan. You will not want to miss that. Until then, follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless every single one of your children and your families and our communities. And God bless the great state of Texas.